When I say the name Don King, you think of what? What do you think of?
King was a rival for a long time.
Right.
And he came from a different place from the place that I came from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had served time in prison, and he was a real street guy. But he had a way of expressing himself that caused people to notice. He was a very good promoter, but he was a vicious competitor. But when the fight had to be made with his fighter and my fighter, we found a way to do it. And he was a good partner, whether it was Leonard and Duran first fight in Montreal or Oscar De La Hoya in Trinidad. I did a number of fights with King, and they were all, very successful ventures.
Did you get along with him or not really?
Only when we were counting up the money.
Did you have to look to see if you were getting your share?
No, but we collected. That was part of the deal. We collected it.
You were doing the collection and disbursement, is what you're saying.
What?
You were doing the collection
My company
and disbursement.
was doing. You're right, and then we were dividing it. So I didn't have that angst, which I would have otherwise might have had.
Well, I guess that's why you're so good at it and why you've done it for so long, Bob Arum. And so, wow. So do you have a no mas story that we don't know about? Anything like that? You mentioned
what do you mean a no mas
the Duran story and Roberto Duran or anything
No,
like that?
I know what happened. I mean, it's clear what happened because I subsequently became Duran's promoter when he fought Iran Barkley in one of the great middleweight fights. And then the third fight with Sugar Ray Leonard. What happened, and Duran expressed it to me, and it was true, is when Duran beat Leonard in the first fight in Montreal,
yes,
he went back to Panama, and he was like the king, and he acted like the king. I visited him subsequently, and he had a house that had expanded, and there was a pool in the back, and he would have 40 people over, eating steaks and drinking champagne and having a great time. And the last thing in his mind then was fighting. And then Mike Trainer, who was the manager of Ray Leonard, told King, in effect, you guys can keep all the money. We just want the rematch, because Ray felt he could beat him. And so Carlos Aleta and King cut up a lot of money, and they forced, in effect, Duran into that second fight before he was ready. Duran trained for the second fight basically just to lose weight. And after the weigh-in, he gorged himself on 2 steaks, and crazy. And so he was in no real condition to fight, not fighting condition. And Ray played with him, danced around him, and Duran couldn't even hit him and was being humiliated, and he quit. That was it. He was angry at everybody, and he quit.
So you've also promoted 4 Mike Tyson fights. What was that like, promoting a Mike Tyson fight, Bob Arum, for you?
Well, Tyson at that point was crazy. His manager and his managers were in fear of him. They were afraid to let him loose between fights. They put a lot of pressure. We were doing those weekly shows for ESPN from 1980 to 1985. So this was during that period. And they wanted him to fight once a week because otherwise he would get into terrible, terrible trouble. And he had established a reputation of being this real killer. And so it was hilarious. You'd put him in with a fairly good professional, and you could see the opponent's knees shaking.
Right.
And so Tyson would walk across the ring, throw one punch, knock him out, and that was that. But it became, it wasn't good television. It seems great, knockout and so forth. But when it goes on repeatedly, 4 quick knockouts, we weren't getting the airtime that was required, and we stopped promoting him.
Do you have a Sinatra story? Have you ever come across Frank at boxing?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you got for me?
Well,
Anything?
a number of years ago, I had my late friend Saul Kersner, who built and owned Sun City in Botswana, which was a homeland in South Africa, had Sinatra there singing. And Saul was a big boxing fan, and I came up with an idea that we would do 2 championship fights, and then Sinatra would do a concert. And Mickey Rudin, late Mickey Rudin, the lawyer for Sinatra, was in the hotel, and Sinatra was in the hotel in the St. Regis in New York. So Mickey said, what a ridiculous idea. Frank could never go for it. So I said, well, let me go up and talk to him with them. And I started talking to them. We do Duran against Davy Moore, and Sinatra, I could see he wasn't interested. And then he said, and what was the other fight? And I said, Ray Mancini against Kenny Bott. He said, Mancini? I said, yes. He said, I'm in.
Boom
I'm
Boom
in.
got him in?
Boom Boom. He was a crazy Boom Boom Mancini fan. So we signed a contract, we set up a press conference, and Sinatra was at the press conference, and it was going to be on closed circuit in the United States, and everything was going swimmingly well.
Oh, no.
In those days, we were not sophisticated, so I wrote the commercials. So I remember going with Lou Vopicelli, my director, to the Kennedy Center where Sinatra was, to have Sinatra do the commercial. And he looked at it, and he said, terrible. And he then did his own commercial for it, which was great.
Okay.
Right? And a week before the fight, in training in South Africa, Ray's collarbone was broken. And once that happened, Sinatra pulled out. It went down. We were calling it Chairman and the Chams. It never happened. But Sinatra, I found, was a really great guy. Terrific guy to work with, fun guy. I really admired him.
Riding high in April, shot down in May. I guess that's
Right,
life,
exactly.
right, Bob? Oh, my gosh. You almost had it. What a night that would have been.
Yeah.
How about that? Sinatra's a Ray Boom Boom Mancini fan. You probably never thought that was coming today, did you? That's amazing. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.